Is this thing on? Whoa. Hey, everybody. Let's see. I don't need to stand that close. Is this good? Is this a good volume so I don't hunch over? I'm kind of tall. Awesome. Welcome. How are y'all doing today? Pretty good? I just flew in from the States on Monday, and this place is beautiful. I need to come back. I'm leaving on Saturday, but I love it. The people are amazing, beautiful in and outside. You guys are awesome. So thanks for having me. Today, I'm going to be talking about VFX, as you can tell. My name is Jason. I'm a visual effects artist myself, and we'll get into that in a sec. So essentially, there's a big topic to cover here. We're going to do the best to cover it in 45 minutes. A little bit of housekeeping. In the app, if you want to ask questions, you can queue them up, and then they will be asked at the end. I'm going to hopefully leave a little bit of time, and we'll get through as many questions as we can. So yeah, let me just see if this, yeah, it does work. Awesome. So introduction time. I'm Jason Kaiser. Kaiser, kind of like geyser. It's the weird American spelling, I guess. I don't know. So I used to be at Riot Games for about 6 years. Before that, I had a career. I've kind of been in and out of making different kinds of effects, animation, or art generally for games since about 2007. So I love what I do. I'm going to get more to that in a bit. Here's a few of my works up there that you can see. And I loved it so much that I quit my dream job, and now I have my dream company teaching effects. It's called VFX Apprentice. We have lots and lots of content that you can go check out over there. I've got a YouTube channel as well. It's totally free. I'll get to that later on. So yeah, lots of stuff to go over with effects. It's a really great topic that I don't know, I just can't get enough of it. I'll just dive right into it. So a quick recap of last year. Last year I wasn't here, but I was giving a talk at New Zealand GDC remotely. And I did that with one of my instructors, Gabriel. And it was an awesome experience, but we knew that we wanted to come in after COVID permitted. And so I'm going to do a quick recap of that because this talk does build off of what we talked about there, just so you have a quick refresher. So I spoke a little bit about my own journey. So when I started back in like 2007, I always joke that it took me 9 years to get a 4-year degree because I was a slow learner, I guess, and also kind of distracted and lacked discipline, et cetera, like many of us do at certain times in our life. And I ended up taking a lot of classes over the course of that time. I think I took something like 9 figure drawing classes. I just drew like crazy because I wasn't naturally that good. I would say I came into art school like at the bottom of the pack, and I ended somewhere maybe in the middle by the end of it. But I just kept going and going and going. I was really into like 2D and hand-drawn stuff. I did like these little animatic, and that was when it was called Flash instead of Adobe Animate. And made a whole city in 3D and could run around in it with my friends, but then got bored and never textured it. So there it is. And really, I just found it wasn't quite clicking. I knew I wanted to be creative, but I wasn't sure what was it for me at that time. And then I had the opportunity to do this on the left. You see, this is an animation by a guy named Ryan Woodward. He's a pretty well-known artist in the industry, and he was my faculty. He was my mentor at school. I was very fortunate to have him because he's like, hey, you like 2D animation, come and do some in-betweens for me. So he animated that and a few other sequences. That was for the Polynesian Cultural Center in Hawaii. And that's for their night show. I don't know if they still have that or not in their night show. That was a while ago, but I instantly fell in love with these shapes that he was designing and making them move and just seeing that happen on the page. I went on to do my student film, which is on the right, called A Light, about a boy made of fire and a girl made of water, and just was off to the races. I just loved it. I had so much fun making these effect shapes. Got my first job in my junior year of college, which really was like, you know, my last year of my master's or doctorate program with how many years I was in there. Only got a bachelor's, but did enough to get a doctorate. So anyway, that was a lot of fun doing that. And then I got this awesome job on a game called Animal Jam. That was a lot of fun, just doing 2D effects, animation for them and character stuff. And then I applied to Riot Games, and that's where it all fell apart. So my 3D skills, you can see the test that I did for them. On the left is the 2D version of what it was supposed to look like. And on the right there was the best attempt I could do in 3D, which at the time was really disappointing and terrible. But I did what I could, and I was trying. I was really, really trying. But they took me anyway because they saw something in me with my 2D skills. And eventually, over time, through lots of grit and practice, I managed to translate that into actual in-game content and making successful effects. I think in the end, it worked out quite well. I was there for about 6 years on various projects with Riot. And what I found through this experience was, like how much I loved learning and growing and making this stuff. It was really satisfying for me. But then also I saw how challenging and how long it took me to get there. I mean, like 9 years in school, like really struggling and like working through very limited documentation and information on how to learn effects and how to do this stuff. I was one of the fortunate ones that got, a large studio took a chance on me, and they had all this training infrastructure and so many other artists on the team that really knew their stuff. We had artists that had come over from Diablo 3, leveling up the League of Legends style at the time. And it was just this perfect moment that I kind of skated under the door as it was closing, and got in before the standards were higher. So that was really nice. And then I was like, really what we need to do is take that magic that we had there with learning from each other and share it out, because we constantly had problems with hiring. We never had enough effects artists, as Riot does a lot of effects heavy work. They have like splashy effects playing here and there and everywhere. And you would think that they would have no trouble being so dominant in the industry, attracting talent and getting awesome people to come work there. Well, that's not always the case, because once you cross a certain threshold of like expectation and artistry and technical knowledge and everything else, you find that the talent pool gets really shallow really fast, simply because the training isn't there. There are exactly 0 degree programs in the world for real-time effects animation. I checked. So you would think that somebody would have realized, oh, we should have a program for that, or we should teach that as a specialization similar to character animation or environment art or whatever. But that wasn't the case. So from there, I decided I would take matters into my own hands and quit my dream job, start my dream business, and start teaching. So I founded VFX Apprentice, I think it's been 3 years ago now. And it was immediately obvious that this was something that the world needed. This was very clearly something that both studios and students were cheering me on. They were like, yes, please, finally, somebody's like dedicated to teaching specifically effects development for game development. And this was a lot of values. There's a lot on here, so I'm going to stay here for a little bit. It's a lot to digest. There were certain values that I developed throughout my journey that kind of came by personal experience that sort of translated into these 7 values. And they ended up becoming the 7 values of VFX Apprentice. This is what we try to embody both internally with our team and also externally with our community of apprentices. And for me, I think this is what I've seen work. Like, we need strong community. We need people that rely on each other. We need to be humble. We need to learn and grow. And we need to stay on track. So from my standpoint, like, I try to focus on the individual and just understand, okay, where is it you're trying to get to? What are your goals specifically? Because obviously we're a very diverse community, and I really think that diversity is our strength. I'm going to get to that more in a bit. But what it really comes down to is the individuals are all part of a larger ecosystem. And this word came, I think, it was probably a year ago that it finally dawned on me. I was like, okay, we don't have a school really. We don't necessarily have like a training program per se, because there's lots of different tracks within effects to focus on. But what I think we do have is an ecosystem of learning. And so when you think of an ecosystem, think of like your garden in the backyard, right? You've got plants growing there. And how do you get the plants to grow? Do you go up to the plant and just like force it to grow? Like, yank it up, you're like, okay, get taller, get bigger. Obviously not. That's not going to work with a plant. I don't think that works with artists either. I don't think that's how you get artists to grow. What you want to focus on instead is the ecosystem that surrounds that artist, just like with the plant. We got to make sure the water's good. We got to make sure the soil is good. Make sure it has enough sunlight, give it the right temperature. If you do those things, plants happen sort of naturally, right? They just pop up and they thrive, and the weeds thrive too. But you have an ecosystem there. And from that, the bugs come, and the bugs contribute too. They pollinate the flowers, et cetera, et cetera. All of these things are just incredibly out of your control, except by virtue of sort of being the lord of the ecosystem. And so that's what I look at when I'm trying to think about how we're going to actually create enough effects talent in the world. How are we going to get people animating sparkles and explosions? Not by telling them to just go animate sparkles and explosions and just expecting them to do it, but by creating the right environment for them to do that. So really the talk today is just that. It's a focus on all the aspects about what VFX Apprentice is trying to do. And not just necessarily, I don't want to say that this is just a talk about VFX Apprentice, because VFXA is plugged into a much larger ecosystem as well. The community for effects, if you're not familiar with like realtimevfx.com or other components of the VFX community, it is a thriving ecosystem. And the only reason we're succeeding is because the larger group of people outside of that is also thriving and cheering us on. So I'm going to go into that, and I'm going to go into all the different things that we find are working. Like I say, we've been going now for about 3 years, and it's been a wild ride. I did not go to business school. I went to art school, and yet here I am running a business now, and it's quite fun and exhilarating for me. I have hard time sitting still, so it's kind of perfect. Okay, so we'll start with the why, because I think, honestly, like Simon Sinek says, if you're familiar with that guy, your why really is the thing that governs everything else. If you don't know why you're doing something, maybe take a minute and pause and figure that out. And then everything else after that becomes a lot more straightforward and simplified. Okay, so number one, before anything else, the number one reason why I do this is because I freaking love it. It is so fun. It's so satisfying making effects. I really love I don't know what to even say about it. Like, it's such a broad topic, effects, that you kind of need to learn almost every aspect of the game development pipeline to really thrive at it. I often tell people, if you are a generalist and you're not quite sure what it is you want to do, consider being an effects artist, because you might just find that, you get to do painting, you get to do modeling, you get to do composition, animation and timing, a bit of tech if you want to. It's a blend of all of it. And so if you get bored very easily just doing one thing, effects will keep you occupied your entire career, guaranteed. But as much as I love making effects, I think what I love even more is seeing other people hit their own dreams and visions because of, in some small part, how I contributed. That to me is like, that gets me out of bed in the morning, to be honest. I love seeing other people hit their highest aspirations of creativity. And that's my why, is to help them do that, to help them get there. So these are students of ours on VFX Apprentice. They come from all levels of experience. Some of these have never done effects before in their life. Others have a bit of experience under their belt by the time they're doing these, professionally speaking. And every time I see more student work, I'm just like, it's working, like, awesome. Like, I'm so glad I got out of bed today to come into my computer and see the beautiful things that people are making because of the school that we're building and the ecosystem that we're contributing to. So that's definitely number one. I just love it. To get more specific, I mentioned earlier my own painful journey. One other of the whys of why VFX Apprentice exists is to reduce the pain and suffering in the world. There's enough pain and suffering that's like legitimate out there. You don't need pain and suffering when you're making video games, right? At the end of the day, we're doing something that should be fun and playful and enjoyable and satisfying, and it should be an escape from all that drama of the world. The last thing you need is drama when you're trying to figure out where that button is at, how to do that thing, why your art isn't as good as you want it to be, etc. So removing that pain and confusion is a huge part of my why. Also, I want to add some goodness to the world. So I love seeing this stuff. It makes me happy. It makes other people happy. When people are playing video games, effects make them happy. And that to me just puts a smile on people's faces, and it's a big reason of what we do. And then finally, I want to make something big and something I think that has a big impact. And of course, that comes to the other points I'm going to get to later on about how VFX Apprentice really is global, and we have a global mindset about transforming what the effects landscape is, not just in the United States, and not just in Europe perhaps, but literally in every time zone, in every economic income where people are making video games, I want to be able to impact that as well. So we'll get into that. But really, at the end of the day, it comes down to our apprentices. So I call anyone an apprentice if they sign up with us, if they come into our community. You're an apprentice automatically. Congratulations. So here's 3 of our folks who got some jobs that they are really happy at currently. I guess Tom on the end, Fortiche comes in cycles. They did Arcane, the Netflix show from the League of Legends universe. But so yeah, he's on to other things now. But I've got listed here these 3, and I want to clarify here as well. Our goal is to get students the jobs that they want. And I'm showcasing some big, fancy, shiny jobs here. But honestly, what might be fancy to another person isn't necessarily appealing to another. Having worked at both small studios and large, I know from like personal experience, there's massive pros and cons in each. And sometimes we have apprentices coming through and they're like, big studio's not for me. I don't want that. I want like a small, intimate team. I want to have a big impact. I want to really contribute to the vision of it. Let's get me set up with that kind of job. Whereas others are like, I'm actually passing up job interest because I have my dream studio and that's the one place I ever wanted to work. And I'm headed there, hell or high water, it's going to happen. So I'm going to give these 3 case studies today in the talk just because I feel like they're pretty remarkable individuals and they worked very hard to get to where they are. We have many other apprentices that have gotten many other jobs as well that I could talk about, but we only have so long in the talk today. So if you have questions specifically about student journeys, that's a great thing to ask in the app, or if you want to come up afterwards when we have some time. I'd love to like hear your thoughts and your questions on like, but what about this type of journey and that type of journey? Because those are my favorite questions to answer because it means that you're on the path and I can impact that in a very direct way. Okay, so of course, this is a massive part of the why. We help students get the job that they want to get. We help them fulfill their artistic creativity. And each of these individuals, from working at those projects that they're on now, they learned so much. They grew artistically because of being surrounded by the teams they were with. And so it's way more than I could teach them in our community. They get plugged into the studio community and they just really take off. All right, so what do we teach? Well, depending on the instructor, you're going to get a different approach, right? I think anyone who's been to college recognizes this. Like there are as many different approaches to teach as there are instructors to teach it. And so what is it? Like when you have such a vast topic, where do you start? Well, there's quite the spectrum, and I don't even know anymore if I should call it a spectrum because spectrum implies only 2 points. But this is more like a matrix of like, infinite amounts of combinations of things and effects. There's things like tech and art, which is a very common shorthand for describing the diversity of things that are encompassed in effects. But we also have things like platform. You have things like art style, things like gameplay, genre, on and on and on. And these all have different needs from effects. And so, but yeah, simplify it down. We strive to do it all at VFX Apprentice. We have built our curriculum to accommodate as wide, and we're expanding it all the time to do that. So it really comes down to, we teach what the student wants to learn, but also what the studio wants them to learn. And I'm going to talk about how we bridge that gap because it's surprisingly different at times because students have certain assumptions about what they should know, and the studios have requirements on what they need applicants to know. Coming into that thought, it's a bit like herding cats. This is a joke tweet by Gabriel that was shared last year as well, where there's I think a disconnect between what the industry is looking for in effects. It's like, yeah, basically you just kind of need to do everything and be awesome, but also we have junior pay, but be amazing, and we expect you to do all these things, and you need experience, but you're a junior. And there's a bit of, I think it's a little bit like Wild West. It's like unsettled right now because effects is still finding its way. Like I said, there's 0-degree programs, so there's not many standards set up. and we're trying to fill that in. A lot of my time actually through VFX Apprentice is spent consulting studios directly. So I'll do things like webinars. I'll come in and I'll assess the pipeline with my team. I've got my my people. I don't know what I call them because they're generalists and they wear many hats. But they come in and they help me assess the pipeline and optimization. I come in and assess style and gameplay readability, and also like whatever the goals are, setting up goals for effects, all that kind of stuff directly. That's a service that we just started doing about 8 months ago, and it's been found quite valuable by a few different studios. So we go around helping out directly with the studios, and we're in contact with them regularly. Obviously, they're our clients. And then we turn around, on the other hand, we're talking to the students. And they're like, what should I do? What should I do in my portfolio? What should I do to prepare? Where do I start? These are all great questions, and it really depends on the studio you're going to. So some of our clients are quite large, like 1,000 people plus. Others are quite small, where maybe they have an effects team of like 1, maybe 2 people. And so depending on the studio that you're going for, there's going to be very different needs. And so I try to like narrow that down with the apprentice of like, okay, so you want to be an effects artist. That's awesome. That's only like this broad of a spectrum. Do you like drawing things by hand? Or do you like working in a node graph editor? Do you enjoy, or what is it you enjoy about the games you play and the effects in those games? What are some iconic games that you would just dream to work on that project? Or do you want to work on indie games, and do you just love, what's happening with mobile and all the opportunities there? And what is it that gets you up? What is it that gets you excited? And so we kind of try to bridge that gap between what studios are after and what students are after. I feel like we're doing quite well with that. There's a lot of lessons that we keep learning, and we've made a lot of mistakes. Plenty of mistakes, because we'll try things and then we'll hear pretty immediately, we didn't like that content, we didn't think that was applicable, we didn't think it was useful. Always there's someone else who has the opposite feeling of like, that was the most useful thing ever, whatever. I think that's just the result of all the diversity experienced across industry. But yeah, these are some of our lessons. This is some of the, just to kind of get a glimpse at what we cover. And there's much more. I think we're currently at well over 120 hours of tutorial content, and then we have, in addition to that, like ongoing live streams and trainings and everything else happening. But yeah, you get the idea that at some point, I guess at no point will we ever reach full coverage of everything. So that's what we teach everything. That's like the short answer to a very short question. Okay. So moving along to who teaches and how much time do we have left? We got 20 minutes before Q&A, give or take. If we want to leave like 5 minutes. Okay, good. We're doing good. So who teaches? Well, I think there's a really great shorthand for how to understand if a school is right for you. Not necessarily if it's a good school. I don't want to say that. I want to say if it's right for you specifically. Take a look at the school and think, okay, are the students from that school getting jobs that you want to get? And are the instructors teaching at the school working at jobs or have worked at jobs that you want to get? So it really comes down to the job, in my opinion. Otherwise, why are you spending money on the school if it's not going to get you to a job that you want? And a great way to evaluate is, well, who's there, right? So this is who's at VFX Apprentice. There's way more than I could fit on a slide. Our approach to teaching is very eclectic. I like to collect things. I'm huge into Pokemon. I think of our instructors a bit like Pokemon because they all have different skills. They all have different advantages and things that they really excel at that they bring to the table. And back to that thing about every instructor teaches differently depending on their background. That's certainly true with our instructors, and we've come to lean into that. So when we start off a new series with an instructor, you're going to do 8 lessons on modeling for effects. You're going to do 8 lessons on hand painting textures for effects, or whatever that series is. We will talk with the instructor about their personal background, what they want to bring to the table, and we allow that to be what it is. We don't have to worry about any bureaucracy of like accreditation or figuring out, does this match with like a base requirement? Because again, we're in the Wild West. There is no established norm for effects. We are establishing it actively. And so we get them in, and we have them teach their content their way. And this is where the learning comes, because a little series of lessons will come out and students or apprentices will tell us whether they loved it or hated it and why. And that's such a beautiful, precious piece of information that we take very seriously as we continue to iterate. So we have a full list of instructors, and it's always growing over on our site. You can go check that out. Okay, so also it's worth mentioning here, Tom, who you saw on the previous slide, was a student with us, went on to do this awesome work for Arcane, which you can see showcased here. And now he's an instructor with us too, because obviously he's dang good and he's legit and knows what he's doing. So why wouldn't we bring him back to, the student has become the master, right? And this is, again, what I mentioned before about the ecosystem, where you don't always get to control which plant is going to bear tons of fruit or which ones aren't, but you have to go with it on the fly. You can't say, this one was marked from the beginning to be the one that we're going to get all the other plants out of. It's like, it might be the most unexpected one in the corner of the garden that is like, oh yeah, that's amazing. And now we can be very agile and pivot to have that person come back and share awesome stuff with us. I think it's just been really delightful to see the growth of the apprentices. And Tom's not the only one. We have other apprentices that have gone on to become instructors with us. And it's so funny, every time I approach them, they're so humble. They're like, I don't feel qualified. Like, I don't know if I'm good enough. And I'm like, you're good enough. You're fine. Trust me. When I started my YouTube channel, that like was really well received at the time, it was well received simply because no one else was doing that kind of content. And I was only, I think, in my second year at Riot. I wasn't necessarily qualified to start either. I just threw myself into it. And that's kind of the mentality I have with the instructors. As soon as I see the talent, you're an instructor. I don't care if what your background is or whatever. If you've got the stuff and you can prove it, that's good enough for me. Okay, so that's who teaches. Then the question arises, how do we teach? As I mentioned before, diversity is our strength. Definitely, there are many, many different ways of the how and the methodologies that go into it. And we even find not only with instructional content itself, but with like totally different forms for teaching, this really comes into play in a big way. So each student has a different preference of what they like, right? You know, some people will tell me, I actually got this feedback at one point, like, I just wish you had more lectures. Like, it's nice that you have all this hand-on, follow-along kind of stuff, but I need you to like talk to me about principles for like a few hours, or I'm going to go crazy. Like, I'm tired of making stuff. I need to sit back and listen and absorb verbal information with visual aids. And I was like, oh, I never thought in my entire life I would want someone, like I would meet someone that like wanted more lectures from me, because I always thought hands-on is the way to go. You know, you got to get in there and make it yourself to really understand how it works. But reflecting back, I think a lot of that was me taking my own art school education for granted. Like I said, I spent 9 years in school. That's a lot of lectures. That's a lot of time being talked at about artistic principles and, you know, hearing critique and review on other students and their artwork and what made it good versus not. And that being, you know, all the way back starting in 2000, when did I graduate high school? 2002. So when I graduated high school, like that's a ton of art input and artistic principles and lecture information that is easy for me to feel detached from because it's so far in the past, which is why it's so valuable having like current day apprentices telling me, this is what we need. Don't you know, like that's crazy to try to learn effects any other way. And I'm like, oh yeah, I did learn it that way. It was just a while ago. And so it keeps me on my toes to stay flexible with things. So yeah, this is reflecting, if you hadn't got it, like hand holding versus just doing your own thing on the left side. And it's really funny to see different individuals latch on to different methods as they go. It's exciting. It's exciting to watch how they take to the content. Okay, so then we have Abby, and I'm going to contrast a bit here between a couple of the apprentices. You remember Abby got the internship at Epic Games. She's now been converted to full-time. Yay for Abby, we're so excited for her. So she had this idea to do this like toxic skull explosion. And Abby came to us with experience as a jewelry designer. So she knew design principles, she knew some software, but she had never animated in her life. And so she's like, yeah, I want to do this toxic explosion like you see up there in the top left. And she figured she might like sculpt the thing because she wasn't thinking about how it might move and how the material might look and all that stuff. And really had no clue what she was going to do. So she came with this concept to our weekly review. We have a weekly live review on Discord. And I told her, I was like, oh, this is awesome. I can imagine that like with the eyeballs stretching out and the wisps swirling around, all this stuff. And she was kind of quiet. I was like, well, what do you think about that? And she's like, I don't know how I make the eyeballs stretch. I was just going to like build a skull and then have that there. And I was like, oh, you probably don't want to build it as a skull. You probably should do it as a texture. She's like, well, what are you talking about? And so we went into like construction and assembly and all these things to sort of walk her through that process in a back and forth kind of way. She needed to hear that in the live session. A tutorial would not have gotten her there, right? She needed to be able to ask questions and be interactive. That was her learning style. So eventually she got there. She got this piece. And within about 3 months of starting with us, she was portfolio ready and started getting all these studios reaching out for like internship offers. And then she landed the one at Epic after that. And like I say, I usually wouldn't expect a 3-month turnaround with somebody. I think number one, she came to us with previous art school experience. So she had a lot of design fundamentals down. And number two, she was doing this full time and even overtime. She didn't have a job and she was just like going to town doing this like day and night. Every week she came with massive updates. She was really pushing hard for it. And so I felt like she was a great success story to kind of point out. Then we have other ways of learning. Sometimes somebody needs to do a change of learning in the technology that they use. So Nicholas, who was also shown earlier, he's on the Overwatch team currently. And he needed to transition from Unity to Unreal because he really wanted to push the fidelity in his portfolio. And so it's kind of funny because he moved from Unity to Unreal and there's some other works, but this was the one that's actually done in Unity. So I kind of cheated, but this is a before and after of what he was going through the process of like the weekly reviews. You're not always there at first and that's okay. We walk you through it. Timing wasn't there, the composition, not enough emitters working together. The punch and the satisfaction definitely needed some work. On and on and on. And this was one of the key pieces that showcased in his portfolio to draw the attention of the Overwatch team over at Blizzard. So really excited for him. Another thing worth mentioning here is, Nicholas, he's one of those that did pass up a lot of job offers before this. So he's like, I could take a job because I'm getting these like people reaching out, they're seeing my portfolio on ArtStation, etc. But I want to wait. Because I know that big opportunity is coming. And he and I talked a lot about it. I was like, at your current rate, you'll probably be ready in a few more months, maybe give it some more time. And he was with us for a total of a year before he got the job at Blizzard. And again, the whole time he was able to just focus on being a student, practice. And yeah, he didn't have a college degree. He was mostly coming from a technical background and didn't really have a firm grasp on the artistic principles, so kind of a different angle than what Abby had, and that was his story of how it played out. Okay, so where do we teach? Where are we at? Well, the short answer is everywhere. This is me. If you hadn't guessed, I like speaking. I travel a lot. I love getting around the world to see, just for the sake of seeing the world. Like I mentioned at the beginning, New Zealand is very captivating. Other parts of the world are also very fascinating to visit too. And for me, it's just, I get a kick out of it. So there's that component, but then also we're on Discord. And I know that a lot of companies, they mention sort of in passing, oh, we're on Discord, follow us on Discord, get updates on Discord. I can't stress this enough, the part that Discord plays in the vitality of our ecosystem as a group. So I think in VFX Apprentice, we have something like, 200 active Discord users at any given time, and it's always rotating. So like any good ecosystem, it has energy flowing in and out of it. And so it's very lively. Like if you post in there, you're like, I need feedback on this. Someone's going to jump on that, usually within minutes, like definitely within a couple hours. And you get the notes that you need to proceed to the next stages that you want to go to. We have like multiple live events. We have them in different time zones. We are currently looking for Oceania time zone and mentor, if anyone in here is looking, because that is a time zone that I don't feel like we're serving as well as we could. But if you want to get up early, I guess is what you have to do. You can do that, or maybe stay up super late, depending on your time. But we have lots of live events. We have a lot going on, just at least with a question and answer. And my current goal for the Discord is that we have conversations and live streaming happening anytime round the clock when you log in. Right now we're doing pretty well. I think like we have a handful of people live streaming every day on our Discord, just like as they're building stuff, right? And it might be a student, it might be a mentor, and we're trying to fill that out so that you log in, there's a community happening, we're making effects. That's the mission there. And then when do we teach? This is similar, kind of just all the time. We're always going. And then there's realtimevfx.com. That's that is at the top there. And it's just kind of always happening. And I'm thinking, I could probably, do we have enough questions to fill the remainder of the time? How are we looking on that? I want to leave plenty of time for Q&A if that's a thing. But if you want to follow up, these are the 3 individuals that we talked about. Like I said, there's a lot on our YouTube channel. You can just go see the interviews that I had with them if you want a more in-depth look. Also, there's a lot of our other apprentices on that, as well as a lot of other instructional content. And then, we'll just go to Q&A.
If anyone has anything that they want to ask in the mic, feel free to as well. Otherwise, I'll read out the ones that come through the app.
Cool.
Hi, Jason.
Hi.
All right, so the first question we have on here is, what's the starting point for someone who would get the most value from VFX Apprentice?
Starting point for someone who gets the most value. Well, it's kind of funny. We're kind of trying to design it, and I think we're doing all right, with the ability to come in at any starting point you want, even absolute zero. So like we have lessons. I don't know if you saw, let me just go back to this on our slide of like all the different lessons here. In the top left, one over, that lecture where it's like diagramming how to construct the thing. There's lessons that are simpler than that. So you might look at that and be a little overwhelmed because you're like, I can't design those shapes. And what is he talking about? So we have lessons that literally it's like draw circles on a page. So it's like how to draw for someone who doesn't draw, and how to create consistent lines that you intend to make in that way. And we build on that to then build those into simple effect shapes, and then on and on. The same with the software. We assume that you know nothing about the software with our beginner classes, and we get you into Niagara and Unreal 5 with like zero knowledge beforehand and go from there. And then as you can see, also it gets quite advanced. So if you're coming in already with some experience, we got that covered too. It's a pretty big range. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, next question is, by having an industry training approach, what have been the challenges of managing progression of learners and meeting industry expectations?
Okay, say that one more time so I make sure I get the full question.
Yeah, so the question was, by having an industry training approach, so training VFX artists for the industry, what have been the challenges managing progression of learners and meeting industry expectations?
Okay, so because we're training them for a real world job, what are the challenges that we run into is essentially what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
So I talked a little bit about some of these. I think there's a mismatch of what we think goes into game development and then what game development really is. I think from talking with people in the studio, something they mention all the time is we need them to understand how to be autonomous so that we can send them on a task and they're not going to deliver something that's going to make our engineers angry, and they're going to put it in the right folder, and it's going to match the visual style so we don't have to coach them on what the style is. And then also it's not going to interfere with the gameplay in the play test, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why we approach it as an apprenticeship. That's our namesake. I think that was really important in the DNA of the company. We have actual game projects that you get when you sign up. So it's like, here's a beautiful corner of a game that's fully functioning with spells, character animation, all the stuff. You hook the effects up to that and you get like a production simulation, so to speak. I think that covers a lot of them. It's kind of a broad umbrella. but there's a lot more that we're still trying to meet. We're working now on some optimization lessons to teach effects artists how to optimize, what to look for. It's different for every platform. It's different for every game, but there's a lot of guiding principles that we can go over there, and we can do better at teaching for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Are you ready for the next question?
Absolutely.
All right. Next question is, what is the average age of your apprentices? And is there a cost to accessing the training support?
So the average age, we don't actually gather age data. We probably should. Like I said, I didn't go to business school. So there's a lot of things I'm not doing right. I think it ranges. I mean, I'd say the game industry generally is pretty young. Usually by the time someone is in their 40s, they're typically in more of a leadership position. Generally, that's an overgeneralization, but that's typically what you see. So yeah, I'd say most of our apprentices are probably under 40, but that's not always the case. Like, we have people going through our content who still love learning later on in their careers too. So, but probably the majority is under 40.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and is there a cost to accessing the training support?
Oh, the cost. Yes. So we currently have permanent access. So you pay for it once and you have it forever. And you can buy it either as one of two bundles. There's the 3D or the 2D content, and then those are broken up into smaller pieces as well. Currently, any one of those purchases gets you permanent access also to the Discord channel. So you can get into the Discord channel for free, and we've posted that previously. We had some free live streams that we did on there previously, and we're going to keep doing those. The free version of the Discord channel is a little different than the paid. So we have a bot that you can like give your code to, and then you get access to the full Discord, which has all the feedback channels and everything else. But you can at least come in and lurk. So you can like check out the general channel and the student work channel and see what people are doing and talking about, and confirm that I'm not lying when I say it is super active.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's basically how that works currently. We have plans for other pricing models that are set to come later this year, but nothing official to announce yet. You can come ask me about that later if you're interested.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think VFX not VFX Apprentice too, but Real-Time VFX is also a good free website too.
Yeah, so realtimevfx.com is a free forum. So you can go on there, create a free account, and post your work and get feedback there. It's the same basic idea, and it's archival. Discord just released a forum feature, so we're going to start adopting their archiving better as well. But you can go on there, you can search like, how do I do this? And someone else has probably already asked that same question. And that's a great way to like get the general review there. I think it can be focused if your work is like eye-catching to begin and people are like jumping on it and want to like take you under their wing. It's a little harder when you're like total beginner. They'll usually say, here's the beginner's guide and here's like a bunch of things other people have asked for beginning. But if you want more hands-on, it might be smarter to go with Discord.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool. I got one more question in the app
Yeah.
here for you. What's your approach for representation in VFX in your program? This includes diversity, indigenous peoples. Do studios ask for this?
Yes, a million times. They definitely are asking for it, and we're trying our very best. Our initial roster of instructors had only white men, and that was very distressing to me, because I had reached out to so many non-white male individuals, so many, and they all turned me down because they're so booked because the demand is so high. It's kind of this weird situation where they're like, yeah, I would love to, but like I've already been tagged for this conference and this other teaching engagement and this other thing, and I'm at a leadership position in my company. And I'm like, I'm so happy for you. I really am. But like, we need help. But eventually what I've found over time is just through patience. We've been able to bring on a lot more instructors that are more representative of a diverse mindset and diverse backgrounds. And I've been very glad for that. So we definitely have that as one of our core initiatives. And it shows, I think, with even our branding, you saw the illustration with like all the eclectic characters, the fire boy and the water girl, but also all the different personalities in that spectrum of effects. We're really trying our best to project that out so that we're not just like dimly lit mom's basement, like making cool, epic, awesome stuff for bros. Like, we want to be much more accepting and involving than some of our gaming predecessors who remain nameless may have been in the past. We're trying to get to that space. Yeah.
Amazing. Does anyone else have any questions? Mike's free. Or you can, if you're more comfortable, put it in the app.
Yeah, I was going to say, feel free to chat me up after. I've got cards here. If you're shy and you want to do email, that's totally fine. I'm going to be around and we should hang out. I literally know like 2 people in this town. So I'm always happy to chat. I'm available here. I'll be around in the conference the next few days as well. So if you see me, come say hi.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks.